Welcome to the TruthLover video podcast. I'm your host, Will Pye, author, speaker, transformational coach, workshop and retreat leader, and founder of Love and Truth Party. You can find out more about me at willpye.com. Love and Truth Party is a self-organizing, self-replicating community and movement of love and awakening, a wisdom school facilitating health, healing, and happiness. You can find us and join our mailing list at loveandtruthparty.org. We exist to empower the deep realization and integration of unitive consciousness of one human being, and to inspire action in the world from this clarity as New Earth ninjas, our playful avatar. We do so in the spirit of play, holding the paradox that all is well, even and including all collective crises, while simultaneously being moved to act, to lessen suffering and serve the creation of conscious culture and society. Our projects include distributing 1 million love letters from the universe, inviting people to receive the love and care in these and within the happiness hacks and other free resources found on loveandtruthparty.org. We believe that in giving we receive, and we invite you to pay forward the value you receive in this podcast by sharing, liking, subscribing for more great content, leaving a review on iTunes, and getting your love letters from the website. Follow us on social media and support us at loveandtruthparty.org. With all that said, it's a joy and a pleasure to be joined by a good friend of mine. I've known MaxAnte for a couple of years now, and what to say about MaxAnte? We're going to talk about identity, cryptocurrency, psychedelics, and revolution, we said today. And we want to be transparent that MaxAnte is not your birth name. Like, this is an alter ego. It's part of your YouTube channel that people can reach at MaxAnte, capital M, capital A.
Yeah, that's right. And actually, we've been friends for pretty much 4 years now, Will. It was early 2015. So that was when we first started talking to each other. How we I met you online and through a friend referral. And so it's been 4 years, and everything you just discussed there, that's been my main area of interest all these years while I've known you.
And how we came to meet was kind of interesting. I think something might be worth sharing with the viewers. And certainly for me, it's one of the sort of mystiques around MaxAnte. You've probably done more meditation, put in more hours than any individual I know on the planet. You're right up there with the lab rats that they put into your Richie Davidson's EEGs and so on, like tens and tens of thousands of hours in Vipassana. And just prior to us meeting, you had a shift and a depth of insight that was beyond anything you'd prior experienced through meditation. Is that fair to say?
Yes, it is. So just my background was that I started doing intensive retreats with Vipassana in the Goenka style, actually, from when I was 20, so from 92 onwards. And so I was completely devoted to that path of Buddhism, essentially, to awaken through samadhi, and my real interest wasn't just to meditate, to just feel more peaceful. I actually really wanted to know what the truth was. I was like, well, hang on. I just took it as legitimate what the Buddha had said, that you could completely awaken from all of your suffering and know the totality of the truth. I mean, that's a pretty radical thing to say. And he said that 2,500 years ago. And so then I was like, all right, well, maybe this is really true. And then I did these decades of, dozens and dozens of retreats, and 50, and going off to India for 1 or 2 months in silence every year and all that sort of stuff. It wasn't until I got to Mexico that, yeah, like you're saying there, I had this other very, massive shift, and it was against everything that I thought was appropriate or that I would ever do. Completely against. So I had to, if you want to talk through that, because there was actually some books that I'd read, there were some other retreats I'd done, other conversations. It took actually years for me to move myself into a position where I would be open to exploring radical shifts in consciousness.
I have 2 questions off the bat of that. So one is, did the Buddha's words deliver through that time? I know we're saying something deepened, and we'll get to the details of that, but you really put that theory to the test, right? That you can use meditation and the Eightfold Path and certain ethical behaviors and know the truth yourself and end your suffering and become a Buddha yourself. Ultimately, did you find that the path delivered?
Not in the way it was sold to me, to be honest. So, and I obviously didn't, I wasn't alone. I was part of very large communities, and I knew hundreds of people who were as devoted as me. Many had done much more meditation than me, had been doing it for much longer. So I was hanging out with these people who, they'd just been at it since the 70s. And then I had met even other monks. So I was going to Burma. I even took robes as a monk myself. So I was, really into this, and at the same time I had a family, I had responsibilities. It was very much kind of a bit like, some of the stuff that maybe Hermann Hesse has written about, or even the Buddha's life, like that whole thing of the householder realm, and then the meditative realm, and then I had a daughter, and then so being a father and having staff and all that stuff, it just put a lot of pressure, but it also intensified my awareness of suffering. You can't have any more awareness of suffering than when you become a parent. That's really, it just ups the whole ante on the whole thing. And so that's, so in observing everybody, well, not just myself, because, you can always keep being told you're going to get there. It's going to get better. You're just one more sit away from cracking through, or whatever the angle is. Or maybe it's actually going to take, what's really kind of effective for these groups is when they tell you, oh, it's going to take at least 10 lifetimes, probably
Yes.
more. Probably, and you're getting there. We can see some progression, but, so you are getting to the point of your question. Amongst all those people I met, because obviously we don't have a little gadget to sort of check on somebody, are they really there? But I did meet one totally remarkable monk, one man I met who had been a monk since he was 9, and he was 42 when I met him. And so it seemed to have done the trick for him. He was profoundly unusual. I'm talking about, there was a little group of us, we took robes with him and became a monk with him. We were kind of shaken to our core just by being near this man. He wasn't I've been to listen to the Dalai Lama. I'd met Goenka himself. I'd been with some of these top head honchos or whatever. And this guy was just he was like maybe the embodiment of what it would be to actually be fully enlightened and have kind of no personality.
Maybe he was on his 10th or 100th or 1,000th life, or whatever it might be. It's interesting, as you describe this guy, it evokes something of what Henry David Thoreau spoke of, and he came to mind earlier on in our dialogue because you said, I wanted to know the truth, and that's something just that I relate to. And I heard or read Henry David Thoreau in Walden write this line, give me truth. It's been immortalized through Walden, but also in Wild at Heart, the book about Christopher McCandless, this wanderer who went off into the Alaskan wilderness and sadly died. He etched give me truth into the desk. So I think this I just want to speak to that, because that's an eccentric, unusual yearning that you and I share. And he said something that I think touches upon this character that you met. He said, I have never met a man who was fully awake. How could I look him in the face? And it sounds like this character was a little bit...
Because I've never been in the presence of somebody who so profoundly kind of loved me and at the exact same time couldn't care less. On the most extreme level. It was so peculiar to have so much space being given without any interest. I mean, imagine somebody giving you their attention completely, but zero interest in you at all. That's a very strange dynamic. And that's why it was so unsettling for us, because we'd never encountered a human who was like that. Humans always have an agenda. They're always seeking to connect. This man, there was no seeking to connect. And yet he was still offering. Very strange.
This speaks to me, and it might be a category of difference, but it speaks to me of a deep listening that can become possible and can be a very powerful therapeutic tool. So when someone is expressing their neuroses or anxieties or fears or shame or emotional suffering, to just be just be present to that.
Maybe, but he didn't even care about that. He didn't care. It seemed like he was purely like a space. And that's why it was truly an alien experience, such that one of my friends upended his whole life and had to go and live near him, become a monk with him for 6 months and travel all over Burma. We were one of my friends couldn't even speak for the whole 2 weeks he was there because he was basically so confronted by being with this man. He was so radically unusual. Upanya Zota, if anybody wants to go and look him up, he's probably only about 55 now. Upanya Zota. He's a monk.
Zota.
Yeah, he's a different ways of spelling that. I mean, maybe they can message you and they can send through if they want to. I think I can even somehow maybe track him down, because this is an unusual person, and he's only probably in his, maybe he's 60 by now or something. Yeah, maybe. So he's still pretty young. But anyway, so we were jumping. You were bringing up some really interesting points there, because about this yearning for truth. And I'm also just going to jump to one of the phrases that the Buddha said, which was, you can be right next to me and be not even touching upon what I'm speaking of. And you can be 1,000,000 miles away and be so close. And so there we were, potentially. And it wasn't just us. There were all these other, dignitaries coming and, bowing down at this Upanya Zota dude. Everybody knew. You couldn't even not know that he was done something to himself. And yet there we were, and it didn't rub off. And so it was like, and my friend Scotty went after 6 months, going into the jungles with him, you name it, doing the hard yakka, meditating with robes and having 1 meal a day. And as a Westerner, as anybody, it's not tough. I was begging on the back streets of Yangon, barefoot, trying to dodge the spit marks and everything on it. And so, even putting ourselves in extreme situations like this, it didn't rub off. And my other friends who were there, like Kedar, who's a monk now, just this continual process of trying to find the best teacher, just going for it, moving all around India, all around Thailand, all around many of my friends, we were all as dedicated as each other at wanting to find out what is the truth here. And can we find this magical teacher, this guy who's going to, just point the way, he'll say the right phrase. And from all my summation and experience, it's not true, because we'd found amazing teachers, and I've been watching my friends continuously do this. And to me, it looks, maybe I'm too harsh a judge, but that they're still chasing around after decades looking for this amazing teacher. And so that's why it wasn't until I started to read the books by Jed McKenna where he starts to do exactly what you're saying, where he starts to say the most radical things about, do you really want the truth?
And to bring us back into the narrative, you found some truth or a deepening of realization upon a beach in Mexico. And this was in some ways, as I perceive it, it's a continuation of your path, but in some ways it was a massive diversion from a path that would prohibit any sort of intoxicant, or, and in this case, an entheogen or a psychedelic. Do you have a preference from the two words?
No, people call them drugs. People call them psychedelics. People call them these are all. Words are powerful. Words do matter, because we have a whole lot of emotional triggers and relationships to words. So people refer to these as hallucinogens. So I do have an issue with that word. That word, I think, okay, really? Maybe you haven't tried this if you think this is a hallucinogen. Because that's when you start to question, well, what is consciousness? So, we can call them sacred medicines is probably the nicest sort of term.
I like that. And just briefly, you used the phrase, it matters, that words matter. And that word matter is very interesting, because we live in a world where we presume matter matters, that we're living in a material world. And one of the revelations of this sacred medicine, and let's be clear, it's 5-MeO-DMT, is the realization of unitive consciousness, of the immaterial. We could say, many people have many different experiences. Perhaps you can share how it was for you to come from this.
Yeah, we'll just go a little bit of a backstory, because it took me all of 2013 and all of 2014, so 2 years of reading Jed McKenna, and basically losing everything that was dear to me. So I had to lose everything and read these books that completely freaked me out and live only out of 2 suitcases, roaming the world nonstop and becoming solo and just basically being willing to throw myself out there, to being willing to get to that beach, because that was a radical thing for anybody to do, let alone where I was coming from, actually.
Right.
And so it was really the challenge of what Jed was talking of, his challenge that you couldn't have your cake and eat it too. You couldn't know the truth and have a safe life.
So you were discarding identities, identity as good husband, as good father, as business owner, or at least modifying that. And that was part of your preparation to then this considerable initiatory step.
Well, yeah, so I was in the woods in Canada in the middle of 2014 doing a 14-day retreat. I'd found this tiny Buddhist monastery with one monk, and I had 1 meal a day stepping around the bear tracks and in this little hut. And I didn't talk to anybody. I had those 2 weeks there in silence. And I was reading Jed, and he says in there that it's so hard to wake up that you have to pray for it, and that you have to be willing to do whatever it takes, no matter the cost. And so this prayer that I want to awaken to the truth, no matter what the cost is, was a terrifying proposition, because I got what it meant. I was like, oh, I'd already let go of so much. I was no longer in my home. I only had 2 bags. I had a girlfriend. So she was the last thing that was kind of my tether. She was the last thing that was keeping me like anchored. And yet when Jed said that, and I heard it, and I was in the middle of the night it was, and I said, okay, let's do this then, because I've already spent 25 years, doing all this meditating Buddhist stuff. And what's the point, actually? What's the point of doing all of this if we're not really going to go? What are we actually trying to protect? Because that's what he was really on about. Like, what are we trying to protect here? You want to basically know the truth, but protect yourself, like literally, while at the same time knowing that you're going to die. So it's kind of an insane proposition that you're going to die, but you're going to try to protect yourself long enough, but maybe you want to know the truth as well. I realized that that not all those things could be maintained at the same time. Something had to give. And I realized that, and when he says as well that it's not so much the yearning for the truth that pushes you over the edge, it's that you can no longer stomach the lie. That's what really hit me. I was like, yeah, I could no longer stomach the lie. And even in Buddhist terms, they talk about when the monk really kind of moves, he recognizes that everything is burning, everything. So when you deeply connect with that, I guess that's when you're willing to maybe do anything.
I think that's the point in Zen. We speak of having our head in the tiger's mouth. It's too late by this point. And it's curious to find this connection with those that have some sort of awakening, profound shifts in consciousness, that often there is a going all in, a willingness to die if that's what it takes. This is more important than anything else. I was having a wonderful conversation with Jeannie Zandi in the previous TruthLover, and she spoke of her prayer being, give me nothing that I want. A recognition that it was that wanting self and that desiring self that was perhaps problematic. And so maybe that gives us a...
Well, I'll go into your next little point, which was actually you asking me about the experience. And so just from that, like I had to, when I finished that retreat, within 12 hours, my girlfriend was gone. So that was kind of this very radical pointer. Like the world was now revealing the truth. It was like, okay, buddy, you're going to step up here. Are you going to step up here? Because now you've made the declaration and now she's gone. There's only you in the world, only me in the world. And now I'm reading this crazy book. Okay, let's go for it. I said, let's just go, whatever this. And I was terrified. And so it took me to Manhattan, and I lived there. And then eventually from there, all these pointers continuously, because that was Jed's main teaching, was surrender to the feedback, surrender to what life is revealing to do, which took me to Mexico. And then I heard about this shaman, and I was surrounded by all these people who were doing these things. Like ayahuasca, 5-MeO DMT from the toad, and I wanted nothing to do with them. I didn't want to have anything. I was telling them to meditate. And they were telling me about this particular guy who they were all going to, and it just sounded terrifying, like very much so. And I did my best to not meet him for months, for 3 months. And then basically I ended up going to Tulum, and I was there for 5 days, and then he shows up and they invite me. He's there for 2 days. So this is when I began to realize, what's going on here? I'm trying to not meet you, and now you're here. And now you're inviting me to this little ceremony. It was too absurd. And so I recognized the indicators, because that's what, so I'd already surrendered, because that was Jed only had a couple of main teachings, and that's only one, like surrender to life, and what, basically hand over your trust, no matter what the cost. Like, but he does also say that that's an insane proposition, that he says, if you have a life that you love, and that's why I'm not recommending this to people. Let's be clear about that. I'm not recommending that people follow this, because and Jed makes this very clear. He says, if you have a life that you love, why on earth would you do all this? Because you're going to set it on fire. And so I'd already crossed beyond that. Like, there was no turning back. It was like, yeah, like you're saying, like your head's in the tiger. So it was like, okay, well, I might as well, everything's gone. And there's just me in the world here. And now maybe it really is possible to know the truth, or to know deeper aspects, or whatever that means. And so, yeah, it was clearly that event was like a complete, I've only had like my first meditation course when I was 20 was like that. It was like a death, and then a new life started. And then that experience on the beach was an even like 1,000 times more than that, because I took I was given basically a semi-lethal dose. I had a near-death experience. And so that was extraordinarily radical, to basically die for about 38 minutes, something like that, because I went blue. I wasn't aware of all of that. And so that's why I'm not recommending this. And also just to say, like, I mean, you and I, we then went on and had our own adventures with these kind of substances, and neither of us died. And so clearly the dosages make a huge difference here. And and that's why I don't work with, and I won't mention that man's name, because I'm not recommending anybody to go and, you don't have to literally like try to cross over to wake up. Although maybe, clearly in my case, some of us maybe do. And so,
well, it took a brain cancer diagnosis to really sort of facilitate my path. So however stubborn we might be, life presents what is required. I want to echo something that you speak to in coming to work with 5-MeO. There was much of your reason and identity and good thoughts would prevent you from working with it, right? Like, why would you do that? It's known, of course, as the facilitator of ego death. So again, like, why? I mean, that's terrifying. And in my experience, maybe I can just sort of fill the viewers, listeners in, that we can perhaps come back to your experience with 5 if you feel called. Your integration afterwards led you to chatting with a friend who had just seen me present in LA, and he thought that maybe I might be crazy enough, or maybe he would be able to offer some context for some of the dissolution of identity and so on that you were experiencing post that. And then soon after, you created this extraordinary retreat experience combining ayahuasca, 5-MeO, self-inquiry, vipassana, qigong, yoga on a private beach in Mexico with extraterrestrial objects or UFOs around the place. And like, one of the best events of my entire life, period. And similarly, in the lead up, I was like, I don't want to go. I do, but I really don't, and I can't afford it, and it's just a terrible idea. And I got there, and still I was like, I'm not going to do the medicine, by the way. I'm just here for the ride.
I remember that. You said you weren't doing it.
And then I did the 2 smaller doses, and then I got to the 3rd big dose. I was like, right, I'm definitely not going to do the big dose. And then the epiphany that came for me, because part of my narrative was no reason to. You know, I've done my meditation, I've worked with ayahuasca, I'm kind of over the whole entheogen thing now, or the psychedelics. And then the epiphany came to me, there's maybe one reason to do it. for the sheer fun of it, for the joy of it. And so that was the intention that took me into that big dose, and that intention was met. It was the most joyful, profound experience of my life. So I'll always be indebted to you for facilitating that extraordinary week.
Yeah, well, that was what a week that was. 7 days.
Mm-hmm.
Changes. I mean, we saw some of our new friends there. You were living with one of them. Radically alter everything about who they were. Just.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's not something to trifle with. What we're talking about. This is actually if you're talking about what's the real deal, and I know people won't even believe it. It's hard to believe that this could be the real deal. But when you're there, even as a witnesser, you go, oh my God. Just watching, just because it's like the impact in the space is like you feel the transformation. You feel it's like something like a meteorite or something hits, and then it's that powerful. It's like a tear in the fabric of time and space. I don't know how else to describe it.
I love that. And that play, we've entitled this dialogue a couple of the points, identity and revolution. And I do feel that sort of shift in the psychology or in the nervous system of an individual is absolutely revolutionary, especially from an insight or a perspective of unitive being, that we are all connected through our energetic system. The research is actually very clear on this. So one individual has an awakening of the heart, or drops consciousness into their heart center as opposed to their mental body, into stillness, into emptiness, into nothingness. And that reverberates around the planet. Just as the Buddha said, it's not I that awoke, but the whole of humanity that awakens. And this is one of the key principles of Love and Truth Party. When you vote in an election, your vote will be discounted most likely. Either Cambridge Analytica will manipulate it out of the way, or the Republicans will ensure it's not counted in the US, or whatever it might be. But in consciousness, in our being, in our vibration, our vote, if you like, is being counted within the collective. If we are at peace, if we're in love, in the vibration of love, that is being counted in the collective. And there's something astonishingly profound about that.
Well, we're always aligned to something, so we shouldn't kid ourselves. We have our allegiance and our tether to truth, to something, and this is usually undistinguished by people. They don't tend to, because it's the world that they swim in. They just take, oh, this is the truth, and this is what I'm aligned to, but they're not thinking about it. And so, because how can you
identity or an organization or a belief system? Is that what you're speaking to?
Yes. And people, usually they like to congregate in groups. And because we've all been conditioned by societies to think in a certain way, then that's what we are. That's our personality is made up of these truths that we refer to. And so because we're so deeply tied to our personality, there's nothing more deeply that we're tied to. And what that really means is society itself, because society essentially conditioned us with the personality. And therefore, that's who we relate to as we are. So it's very hard to have a disconnect or a break or a breakthrough with that, to have a radical shift in consciousness. And especially something that is going to have you maybe could say like a lasting impact. And so, because, many people do different events, workshops, whatever, and they say after some time, not everybody, but some people say, oh, I went back to how I was or whatever. But these are all very strange concepts to think about. What does that even mean, going back to? And so the people have a view around what identity is. But just pointing to what you were saying before about, people do have an allegiance, and they're probably not really always aware of what it is. And in these remarkable experiences that we're speaking to, it's somehow there is a method, or that it's a pathway to being like ground zero. It's like, oh, okay, so this is me without me. This is me without humanity. That's a radical thing to actually, I mean, it's going to sound pretty strange, but to not be human for whatever, even if it's nanoseconds, to have an awakened experience, a remembrance of what it is to not be human, and then to return to the human form, the human consciousness. My experience was that it was a demarcation, like, oh, that old life is gone, and now I have a new perspective.
Yeah, and as you speak, and perhaps to give something a bit more concrete to some of what might happen with this particular entheogen, my experience, I believe it was on that third big session, the big dose, was of dissolution, of complete, and of course I didn't have the experience of dissolution. I don't know that I had that, but rather I know that I was coming back. So I know that there was no one there, that it was the void, the light. It's really translingual, utterly ineffable. And then the reforming of body-mind occurred through vibration coming out through my mouth that I was as aware of as an audience member at the opera would be. I was listening to it enthralled, like, wow, that's extraordinary. I don't know how to chant like that. And curiously, there was
quite a show, Will. I'll never forget.
We must maybe off air, I don't know, check, because I haven't heard as much as I would like, and I wish we'd recorded it. But this Tibetan, as I recall it, Tibetan sounding vibrational chanting coming out of my mouth, which was, as I interpreted it, there was now a reforming me. This was the reforming. This vibration was very specifically designed to allow the identity and the body-mind to reform. And that, I mean, of course, that is an experience that is life-changing. It delivers direct experience and insight that, I mean, I can't put words to how profound that is. So it seems that each of us, even though we didn't want to, ended up working with this extraordinary sacred medicine. I really believe that's an appropriate and helpful framing, and it led to the beginning of something quite similar to my experiences in meditation, where there was insight into the emptiness of self, into non-dual realization. And it was clear that, if you like, now the journey was beginning. Now the spiritual path was actually beginning, founded on this basic insight.
Yeah, for me, I agree. Everything was like a prep. All those 20 plus years, that was like, oh, that was the prep for that moment.
And maybe some listeners, some viewers are at a similar point. Maybe this is just an entertainment piece and curiosity. But as you say, there's no recommendations here. These substances are absolutely not to be messed with, just like you wouldn't get into an F1 car without considerable prior training. You probably want to have a very solid meditation state training practice, probably a good subtle energy practice, yoga, qigong, and so on, before you work with these medicines.
Yeah, like I'd been like a vegetarian for 25 years, daily yoga, done qigong, 2 hours of meditation every day. I'm just sort of giving that as the context. And so, because I have had, I've got other friends who they didn't do any of that, and they've been playing with, entheogens, with sacred medicines, and they have had their own breakthroughs. But in observing them over these last 4 years, they don't refer to it the way we're talking about. It's quite a different context. And so I think that the context and the background that somebody has a huge impact on the kind of the nature of the experience. And because, like, not everybody is looking for the truth, looking to awaken. They might be looking to have healing. Maybe they want to have a healing experience, and they want to just move through some of the barriers that they've had, and now they want to be more self-expressed or let go of things. That's great. I mean, and these things will help with that. So it might not be the complete inner radical revolution of absolutely what it means to be a human. And so it might just be a recontextualizing their life and their relationship with their parents or children or whatever. And that's beautiful. And so not even anybody even needs to do this. Like, we're just, for whatever curious reason, we became connected and we were taken on this journey. It is remarkable, though, that such keys, like such access points, exist in the world. I wouldn't have believed that was really possible. And it is.
And another thing that I wouldn't have believed, and we've framed this in the title, and it's one of the reasons that you're MaxAnte on our conversation rather than your birth name, because you're a successful figure in the world of finance and cryptocurrency and so on. And you're open and transparent, and also felt that it would be wise to go with your YouTube alter ego MaxAnte. And one of the taboos that we've just touched on a couple is, and I can put it in the context of that trip to Mexico. You said to me prior, hey, we're seeing these like UFOs. We're seeing these things in the sky, and they're moving at speeds. And I was like, okay, I mean, sure. I don't believe or disbelieve. And got down to this place, and sure enough, there are these things flying in the sky, and they're moving at speeds that human created craft do not move at, and like going at right angles. And it was really, and I want to hasten to add, before the skeptic dismisses the ontological validity of the observation, this was prior to me ingesting any medicine. This was observed in full sobriety, and so I know that UFOs exist.
And you even had your roommate. Remember, he was waking up in the middle of the night, I think, and going outside and calling out, "Look at them! They're flying!" I mean, you were telling me that he was actively being basically awoken to go and look at them and be with them, and it was very peculiar.
And it had become so normal so quickly that when he woke me up and said there are more UFOs in the sky, I was like, sure, I just want to get some sleep, go back to sleep. I've seen the UFOs, and unless they're landing on the front lawn.
Because I lived there in the jungle twice for 3 months at a time, me and my friends, and even during that week, it was like, do you want to look at the sunset or do you want to look at the UFOs? And it became like what you're saying, so peculiar that, this had now become our waking reality, that we were watching these orbs of light move around in ways that defied anything we'd ever seen.
And to speak to the taboo, I'm always wary of the skeptic. I've developed a fluency in scientific language in order to communicate with people from all walks of life and belief systems and so on. And scientism is absolutely a belief system. There's been a hearing in Congress in the US about the massive, incontrovertible evidence for the existence of UFOs and indeed extraterrestrials. And it's really not something that is actually particularly wacky. The evidence is there, and the question really is whether people are sufficiently open-minded to look at the evidence and accept all these high-ranking officials from government and from the Air Force and so on saying, absolutely, we've seen craft, we've seen extraterrestrials and so on. So that's an interesting thing in and of itself on planet Earth. There's all sorts of talk about disclosure, that this is going to be something that is going to be revealed in a more mainstream fashion. Do you have a sense around that, whether it's a good thing, whether it's going to happen, or will it always be a sort of taboo fringe topic?
Well, I guess I have opinions about what we're talking about, but I'll just give a little bit of a backstory, because when I was a little boy, as a child, obviously I was fascinated by spacecraft and the sci-fi movies and UFOs. And my uncle encouraged this, and he used to show me the photos from Mexico of the UFOs. And that was when as a 7 or 8 year old little boy, that's when I first began hearing about Mexico. It didn't have a huge impact, but it did resonate with me that that's where the photos were. They were in New Mexico and Mexico. There was something about this part of the world. And I guess as I grew older, like, I did have a belief through my own research and what you're discussing that it was real. I thought, okay, this is real, but I'd never seen that. And it wasn't until, and maybe that played a very minor role in my yearning to get to Mexico. I don't know. That was just peculiar to go there. And then the shamanic medicine journeys and the radical transformations in my consciousness. But then from after that, it was after the Toad experience. And then I start to witness them. And it is something that, especially when you see pretty kind of radical ones, like I've had many experiences, but several that were really over the top. My mind just kind of melts. I just can't even, it's so out of context. It's so essentially alien. It's so non-human, this witnessing. It's like, I can't put it in a box. And that we were trained to can we put this in a box and label it?
Right. And I want to be really crystal clear for our listeners and viewers. You're describing meeting non-human beings.
Oh, okay. Hang on. So,
or is that another?
That's another. So, okay. So
are we not going to let that cat out of the bag?
Well, oh dear. Now we're going to do it too. Oh dear.
We can edit that out if you prefer.
No, it's fine. I mean, it's fine. I'm happy to discuss whatever, because we're looking at the truth here. So it just depends how far we want to go. Because I was actually just talking about the orbs of light just then, and the silver spheres that I'd seen. So I was witnessing over an intensive 2-year period, 2015 to 2016, and with my friends and you, and meeting people saying, do you want to come and see them? Because it was localized. That was what this thing, like, I can't guarantee that wherever you are, if you're in the UK or Australia or Russia or whatever, people do have sightings there, but I can't guarantee that. But I'm pretty sure I was saying to people at that time, hey, I can pretty much guarantee this. You come to this jungle and you're going to see them, because we're seeing them every week. And it was true. And everybody I invited there pretty much saw them. And so, yes, that all those experiences and the medicine journeys and witnessing those and being, as you're saying, sober and seeing them, having kind of like messages to come outside at a certain moment, and then witnessing these very peculiar things. And then obviously, even as you're saying, further down the track last year, having various meetings with people or whatever, like it just, life after February 2015 has got increasingly stranger and stranger. And so, and in a waking real world sense, where nothing was the way I thought it was, like nothing about politics, nothing about business, nothing about spirituality, nothing about consciousness, nothing about objects, like so many things altered, as it seemed like my awareness, literally, like it was like my brain was changed and I had more kind of faculties. That's all I can put it down to. I seem to have gained other faculties that were dormant or not there.
And of course, this time frame we're speaking of is the time frame that many a tradition has spoken of as being not the end of times, or yes, the end of times, but also the beginning of times, a time of great transition, a time of one period ending and another period beginning. And I don't want to get too sidetracked into the 2012 thing, but suffice to say that all the intelligent analysis, which of course isn't the mainstream media's endpoint apocalyptic scenario, but rather simply that this is a sort of demarcation point, a midpoint. And what I'm noticing is that each of us are describing how that has been true in our individual consciousnesses and how we've noticed that amongst many others. And it's certainly happening. There's certainly a big shift happening collectively upon the planet. We can look to more darkness as much as there being more light, perhaps, which we could say is the illumination. But maybe we can touch a little bit on one evolutionary and revolutionary function, which is cryptocurrency and the blockchain technology, because that's an area that you have great expertise. I'm really ignorant of. I
guess I just wanted to, yes, let's do that. There was one little question you had before that I wanted to still answer, which was just because I like going through, and we'll come to cryptocurrency in a moment. It was just when you were asking my opinion around what was happening with this disclosure and with the UFOs and all of that, because I was describing experiences and you were describing your experiences. So now it doesn't matter even if somebody says to us, oh, I don't believe you. No problem. That's okay. Sure. Because they could tell me a story and I don't believe it. It doesn't really matter. But I actually do have like a photograph. That was my first encounter, was when I took a photograph. And that blew my mind, because then I was like, hang on, what's this about? And I showed, it was in March. I had the toad experience in February. March, I was in Bacala Lagoon, which is close by an extraordinarily peculiar lagoon. Oh my goodness. Strange events happening all around that. They fly out of there. So that was why I moved. That's why Ishkalak happened. That's why this place has happened for us, because the locals, they were telling me that the lights fly out and they go out to sea. And I was like, well, I want to go and position myself at sea on the coast to watch them. And sure enough, on my first week there, well before you even got there, I'm driving down the road with my friends and remember that road through the jungle, and looking up, it's in the night, and just seeing these like orbs. I'm like, what? is that? And they're saying, oh, that's just the orbs of light flying through the jungle. I'm like, I'm sorry, no. I'm sorry, no, that doesn't compute. I don't understand. What do you mean the orbs of light flying through the jungle? And it just got stranger after that. That was week one. And so coming back to this whole thing about disclosure. And so, I mean, obviously people have been fascinated by, you know, in modern times, UFOs. I probably say maybe since the Second World War, that seems to be like something happened and Hollywood started putting out, you know, sci-fi movies, and since the 40s or whatever, and The Man Who Fell to Earth, all this sort of stuff. And people started taking photos, there were cameras, and sure, I mean, you could go through the records, there's lots of all of this stuff, lots of even stuff from the military of people flying and seeing things and recordings. Now, I have seen those orbs of light, and many of my friends have, including you. And then I've also seen these silver spheres, like a sphere about 1 meter in diameter. And my partner, she said to me, oh, you know, I told her about it, and she said, well, why don't you just look up this video on YouTube? And people have taken videos in Los Angeles. Funnily enough, all of this stuff is happening in North America. I don't know if it's happening that much in the rest of the world, but North America, particularly Mexico, and it seems like maybe even LA as well. And it was identical to what I'd seen, just this silver sphere. But it's about a meter or whatever. So there must be very small or whatever's in there. But I'm just trying to answer this question, because I don't necessarily agree with what everybody's saying that this stuff is. You know, this comments that, oh, these are extraterrestrials. I'm not sure about that, actually. Because what I've discovered for myself through all these explorations is that nothing is the way I think it is. Like, truly, like, it's not what I think it is. And it's so radically peculiar and mysterious. It's so alien that it sort of shatters my views around what I am. And therefore, if I say, oh, it's like another star system or it's a little group, that's coming from Hollywood. That's coming from some, yeah.
So if it's not extraterrestrials, if it's not some humanoid or some alternate species from another planet or another universe or another galaxy, what is it? What possible things could these spheres of light and these spheres that you see, what could they be?
Well, okay. There actually are many. There's obviously a lot of different theories about some of this stuff. Some of it is, let's say, we'll talk about the metal one. It was a silver sphere, and they've been recorded, and I've seen the videos. You can look them up on YouTube as well. Maybe that is actually some advanced military tech from the government. I'm just hypothesizing here. I'm saying that because for sure the military's got way more advanced computer systems, telecommunication systems than what they allow us to have. Do they have, you know, basically silver spheres, completely perfect, that can move and stop and go up and down? And that sounds absurd, that a device could be that powerful. And just that, I saw it out of a plane as I was landing in Mexico City, and it looked like the most ordinary thing in the world, just flying effortlessly beside the plane. And yet I was just gobsmacked. I was like, no, I'm sorry. What is that? And then I saw another one in the US, but that one had a green light in the middle of it. These are very strange objects. So, but I'm not even saying that I think they're from the military. We're just talking about what could they be. Okay, so one idea is that maybe those metallic ones could be some advanced tech from the government that they just don't want to let us know about. Maybe. I don't necessarily even think that's the case. Like, so last year when I was speaking at Harvard actually on cryptocurrencies, and we'll come to that in a moment. I was with some billionaires, and maybe they would appreciate if I didn't reference to who they are, because I could tell you who they are and everybody could just look them up. And they were telling me their stories of like driving through the Nevada desert and looking out at night and seeing the whole plain of the desert in front of them, and then looking up and seeing a massive illuminated object that was bright blue and in the shape of a snowflake hurtling to Earth at breakneck speed. Imagine the whole of the desert being lit up in the middle of the night by a neon blue snowflake. And then as it hits the ground, it just stops and then just goes off into a ravine. Some billionaires told me that. And these are people who are doing massive talks all around the world, helping lots of people, helping children. You know, these are people with great reputations. Now, if I hadn't had my experiences, and perhaps if you hadn't, we would be thinking, maybe they're just a bit, you know, I don't know, whatever. Like
crazy,
yeah. But because we've had our experiences, we go, wow, okay, that's even kind of a bit. No, I have had one experience that touches upon that, but these are definitely radical experiences. So the I think what we struggle with here is that maybe this is just too peculiar. We as humans want answers. We come from a scientific world where we think, oh, we can get an insect and we can dissect it, and now we understand it. We can observe the botany and the flora and the fauna. We've been doing this for hundreds of years. Everything can be deconstructed and explained. Okay, great. Well, how are you going to find one of these and deconstruct that? You're not, because even if I can tell you where they are, we already discussed it. Maybe that wasn't even a good idea to give these locations, because the town folks in these small towns, they don't want. I've sent friends there, and people don't talk to them about it. I was lucky. Maybe I got there a bit early, and they shared things with me. But they don't want the descent of the whole UFO fanatical, whatever, news crews all going there. And even if they see them, so what? You get your camera and you see this speeding light or orb or sphere just hurtling off. I mean, there are videos of guys in high-speed aircraft, like jet fighters, trying to chase these, that they can't. So the most difficult thing here is you can't get it. You can't just go and even if 10 of us got together and they came to us, and I've spoken to people where this happens, you are so freaked out essentially in your ability to think as a rational human, trying to just say, can I just record everything you're saying, please, and note it down, and can we have a sample? This doesn't happen. There's no sampling. You just
not yet.
not yet. Exactly. So maybe this will be coming, but so far this is so peculiar. And I'm trying to answer the question is, well, what do I think it is? Well, I think it's magical. I'm going to try to explain. So the world, as odd as it might sound, has become magical to me, which means that it is not a mechanical system the way I was told it was. That nature itself, the trees and the butterflies and the squirrels and all of this, and the bananas, all this stuff that comes from nature has actually become entirely magical. And therefore, the sort of the pointy tip, the most magical thing are these things. So I've now been able to witness the magic inside, and it has become literally magical, weird things and odd things, witnessing through nature itself, through trees, through plants, where they move, and we can talk about all that as well. But then the most extreme aspect of that are these objects I'm talking about. So could it be that they are simply arising from nature? One of my friends said that when he was in Machu Picchu and he got separated from his crew, they were going back down the mountain, and he realized that it was too dark. Maybe he was taking too many photos, and he was to stay on the safe side rather than slipping down the mountain. He stayed overnight. And as soon as dusk hit, dozens of these little orbs of light started flying around the whole forest where he was for about 20 minutes, and they all disappeared. And then you just need to go back through the literature throughout all the hundreds of years of people seeing the will-o'-the-wisps throughout Europe. And this is a phenomenon that's been going on. But that's a bit different to the bigger, metallic crafts and things. But none of that has actually been really photographed in a hard evidence way. I've got close enough to seeing those silver spheres, and they were small-ish and very odd, clearly. So I know that hasn't given any answer. It's just that I don't buy anything that says that it's from that whatever the government's pointing to. It's too simplistic for me.
I think there's a beauty in the beauty, and the pointing to the function perhaps, and the meaning is to open and expand, to be in the mystery, to be in the beauty, to be in the wondering and the marvel. And I want to also speak to what I feel you and I are actually embodying quite well, and people might be surprised to hear me say it, which is skepticism. So that the skeptic philosophical tradition is to be open-minded. And I'm hearing you be very open-minded. You don't really know what these things are, and there are possible theories, and again, we don't know. And this is the true basis of science. And many people identify as being skeptics, but they're actually not skeptics. They just have a belief system in scientism, and that only that which can be measured and quantified is real, or that only matter is real. And they're closed off to anything that would challenge that belief system. So they're the very antithesis of skeptics. And I want to speak to that because it feels important as we have these sorts of conversations and dialogues into taboo topics that would be considered crazy or insane in mainstream culture.
For sure. Like, I've told some of my friends some of these stories who maybe they humor me. Many people do know about this, that these have been my experience. One of them, he was a scientist, essentially a genius, mathematician and electronics engineer. And he was fine with it all. He just said, he basically did come out and say, oh, I think it's, you can kind of believe whatever you want to believe. Through your sight, you could just be sort of almost essentially imagining things that you're seeing because you want to. He was kind of being quite polite, but he was pointing there. Until I told him the event when I was in the middle of the night and I had this little hunch just to go up on top of the rooftop in that place in Schkalak where we were. And as I lay there with my eyes adjusting to the darkness and looking at the stars, I'd never seen so many stars in all my life. It was so extraordinarily beautiful. The whole deck was illuminated as though it was the biggest spotlight you could imagine just beamed on the whole deck. And I was so shocked, I didn't even think, I just leapt up. And there I was confronted with an orb that was 4 times the size of the moon with red and blue lights spinning around it as it descended into the jungle beside the house like that for about 3 seconds. So that was when I really had my moment of, I have no idea what's going on anymore. I can't understand life. And my friend, he said he was fine, but he said, oh, you just imagined like a hallucination. I said, well, what about when the deck got illuminated before I leapt up? And he didn't know what to say about that. He was like, yeah, that is weird. The deck being illuminated. That's odd. Even he had to give it that, unless he thought I was being a pathological liar. That was his only other way to reconcile the information. And then he just pushed it aside because he was like, it doesn't fit in. Because he can't go and get it and measure it.
Right. And it feels like there's a unifying principle here with entheogens, with meditation, with UFOs, which is direct experience. And that's the nature of truth. If you've seen it with your own eyes, then of course you are able to believe it. If you've experienced insight of the emptiness of self, then that's real and true. Until that's happened as your direct experience, it's impossible to really grasp or understand, and irrelevant whether you believe it or not.
So yeah, let's speak a little bit to like what's the benefit of any of this? Because some people could be saying, okay, I'm willing to give you guys the benefit of the doubt, but my life's fine. I don't need any entheogens, and I certainly don't really need any UFOs. And what's the benefit in any of this? And I can speak to that because, I do feel, maybe I'm wrong, but it looks to me like a lot of people have lost the wonder in the world. They've kind of become almost bored. This is how it looks. It looks to me like people are living like a bit of a drudgery life, and everything's kind of got a bit grey, and it's become extraordinarily predictable. Even young people, they think, oh, this is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to go to school, go to university, get married, have some kids, get a mortgage, get a good job. Life's going to be like this. Maybe die around 80 or 90 if I'm lucky. They've got this whole little thing mapped out for them. And society's fed them the whole formula, all the ingredients. There's no magic in that. So if you throw into the mix of that, unimaginable witnessing, things that you cannot explain that create so much awe in you that it shakes you to your bones, and they're so beautiful and so transcendent, could there be some benefit in that? I wonder. I think so. I think that it could shake you out of the monotony that you're going through in your life and make you go, wow, this world is not predictable. This world is magical. And I am part of the world. Oh, I am the world. I'm in it. I'm witnessing things that the rest of everybody else can't explain. So maybe everything else they're saying isn't really quite so accurate either. So that could be the benefit. However, I'd say probably a lot of people, they don't even want that because they don't want to be so shaken. They like the predictability of what they know. And here, if they were to encounter the things that we're talking about, do they know more? No, not really. They potentially know less. And so, but they have experienced more, but now they kind of know less, which is an interesting paradox.
Yeah, for sure. As you were speaking to that possibility, that someone could be listening to the descriptions of UFOs and magical beings and orbs and vibrational noises coming from our nervous system reforming it. And if they're asking, how is that valuable, then, well, they're probably not someone that I'm going to want to have a cup of tea with, because the essential value is so clear for me. But I think it's a valid question.
But just on that, I mean, but we are in a world of people who've been trained. That's why I think you are doing this. You're doing these talks and you're making this love and truth party, because you do want to speak to people. You want to awaken them. But what are we awakening them to? It's like there's the monotony of what life has been telling them, that this is the truth, and this is the extent to which you can experience life. That it's like putting in a little box. Like, we've got it figured out for you. There you go. We're saying, actually, well, no, actually, there is a lot more going on. And if you're willing to just, well, you and I were willing to go, like, literally way out there to jungles, and people don't need to go that extreme, but you could start to, if you had any sort of faith in what we're talking about, if you could think, well, these guys, they're talking crazy stuff, but they don't sound crazy. Then maybe maybe you could start to allow just the magic into your life. You could start to go, wow, because so we want to, well, I certainly do. I want to, that's the reason I'm writing my books and putting out those MaxAnte videos, is to inspire people to realize that there is more to what they've been told is the extent of life. And I think that people, because I used to be asleep, I used to be in that box, and I know what that was like. And let me tell you, it was no fun compared to this magical reality that's going on now.
Right. I love that. And yeah, absolutely. Part of the reason I'm enjoying this conversation and was so keen to have you on is feeling that strong alignment with your mission and function and what Love and Truth Party is about. And very specifically, we identify 3 illusions or myths or falsehoods, which I would say are separation, the idea that we're separate, that we perceive the physicality and imagine separation from each other. The reality is we're not. We're connected in the electromagnetic field. We're connected in the 0-point field. We imagine separation from our source, from our creator, whether we call that consciousness or God or Gaia or the universe, doesn't really matter. We're not. We are perceiving 2 stories of materialism, ontological materialism, the idea that matter is primarily real and that consciousness is just some bizarre accident of the brain, and that ethical materialism, this absurd theory that is at root of much of our destruction of this gorgeous biosphere, that if we get more stuff, we'll become happy, that in material possessions happiness lies. And thirdly, lack or unworthiness, the idea that I'm not enough, or the idea that there isn't enough in the world. So these are the 3 falsehoods or myths that we identify: separation, ontological and ethical materialism, and lack or unworthiness. And we offer 3 truths, as we would articulate them. One, which is oneness, unity. The other would be being, coming into contact with our being, the joy of just being. And finally, you are loved. We are all loved. We are all enough and whole and complete as we are. And where this is exciting for me, like, what's the value? Well, certainly as an individual who has realized to some extent that I'm within oneness, that I'm one with all life, that that there's a joy in being, and that I'm enough as I am, that I am loved. Well, that's just an extraordinarily enhanced life. And for that to become a common experience amongst human beings, that is a far more intelligent and evolved, functional human system. And I think a lot of what we're talking about is supportive of these realizations and awakenings.
Yeah, for sure. I guess there could be people potentially listening, though, that might say things like, well, that's all well and good for you guys. Look at you two. You're men, you're relatively affluent enough to do all this traveling, or you've got less responsibilities, or there could be a whole list of things. So maybe we could speak about that for a moment, because there is truth, definitely, in that assumption. However, when you heard my story before, where I did come from an affluent society, Australia, I'm basically coming from a very privileged background. However, I did have all those responsibilities, being a parent, having businesses and staff and taxes and so on, and debts. I know what that's like. I know how shackled somebody can be in the social order of having to keep on producing and carrying everything. So with all of that going on, how can you have this kind of awareness that you were just speaking to? And I think that's a big thing. And what gets me interested though is, why is that going on? Because I was there, and what I see is, it looks to me like there are billions of people there. Not like the majority of humanity is kind of in some kind of servitude. They're busy. They're kind of like they've got obligations and they're not free. Here's how you know if you're free. If you can just go, well, this sounds pretty cool. I want to go to Mexico and that jungle sounds pretty great. Let's just go there for a couple of months and just hang out and have papaya and coconuts and enjoy ourselves by the beach. Who can do that? Not many people can do that. Literally, because in these definitions of freedom, which is what I feel is so compelling, is, to be able to go wherever you want, for as long as you want, with whomever you want, and just explore and give yourself the freedom of being like a child. Now, I don't mean to upset anybody by saying this, because that was my dream and my goal. And then that's been fulfilled because I really kept at it. I was like, no, this is possible. It is possible to do this. And I recognize that for a lot of people in the world, it's not even possible. If they're in some labor camp in China or Pakistan or something, this is like just fantasy. And so the way the world is run like that is systematic. There's a system going on here that perpetuates people's servitude, that perpetuates a mechanism that has them not have this freedom. And so, but because I enjoy it, and it took me a long time to get there, and then because you enjoy it, we know how good that is. And therefore we go, well, hang on, if I used to be stuck, I know that wasn't much fun. It was terrible, actually. And I know what it's like to be free and doing all these adventures. Wouldn't I want that for other people? I mean, I appreciate my iPhone, but the guy in the sweatshop or my shoes or whatever, surely there's got to be a better way. And when we look back in history, we see this has been going on for, very intensely for hundreds of years. I mean, obviously it's been going on for a long time, but the last couple of hundred years have been an intensified process of production and basically utilizing people, like we're people, utilizing our effort for production so that others may enjoy the benefits of gadgets and clothes and who knows what. And so I'm just speaking to, well, people would say, oh, that's just the way the world is. It has to be like that. Well, we're talking about a magical world now. We're talking about things that nobody would really believe. And so if we're able to talk about things that nobody can really believe, then we can talk about a world where nobody's in servitude. And that doesn't work for the current establishment. And so I think that there's something going on here that actually is getting something out of that scenario. And that's why I'm really passionate about the cryptocurrencies, because that is a way for a new kind of economic model. And economics is at the heart of people's freedom. And so when you understand that economics is really just about power and power over, then you can start to deconstruct and look at, well, where do I sit in all of this? And why do I have to carry so much of a load and have debts and so forth? And we can probably unpack all that.
What I'd love to do, I really appreciate you bringing, I like that phrase as well, at the heart of freedom. There's something very evocative in that for me. With how much time we've spent in dialogue already, I want to be respectful of your time and our viewers as well. I wonder if we might look maybe to have a part 2 where we look specifically to share. I'd love to hear more from your wisdom and expertise around the revolutionary and evolutionary liberating potential of cryptocurrency.
Great. Let's do that so then we can talk more about the economics and social order and how cryptos play in that. That sounds like another segment. That sounds good. I think so. We've ticked off identity and psychedelics and began the conversation around revolution, and it's been a real UFOs.
And UFOs. Thank you. How could I forget? It's been a joy. You're one of the most interesting people that I know. MaxAnte, it's been great having you on the show. And thank you for joining us. I look forward to part 2. We'll schedule that at some point in the coming weeks.
That would be great. It's been a real pleasure being here, Will. And I really support what you're doing with the Love and Truth Party. This is, these are great conversations to have. And I think we just want to have people realize that life can be whatever they want it to be. Literally, whatever they imagined as a child, there they were fantasizing. Could life be this much fun? Could it be this magical? I'm telling you, yes, it can, but it's going to take significant effort and a plan. And if you start working that plan, you can indeed create a magical life for yourself. But it may take, miracles, and I would just say, just be open to the miraculous and start telling yourself, hey, this actually is possible, even when it looks like it's not, even when everything says to you, no, can't have that. Start telling yourself, okay, maybe not today, but I am going to get there. I'm going to have that miraculous life that I dream of.
And people can go to MaxAnte, capital M, capital A, on YouTube for guidance. You've recorded a lot of very beautiful, content-rich videos on that channel. So I recommend that for people, and they can catch that in the program notes as well. Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, MaxAnte. I look forward to speaking with you soon.
See you, Rob.
Thank you to our viewers and watchers for listening and watching. Please visit loveandtruthparty.org to join our community, download or order love letters, register for our newsletter, connect on social media, and even consider financial support at loveandtruthparty.org. Of course, if you're listening on iTunes, a review doesn't hurt. Subscribe on YouTube, all that good stuff. Thank you to all our existing supporters and contributors. Together we are creating kind, conscious, and courageous human community.